When a plane carrying a group of military cadets gets stranded on an uninhabited island, they slowly degenerate into savagery. A plane carrying 24 American military school cadets crashes in the Pacific Ocean. Before they can drown, they manage to find a lifeboat, which leads them to an uninhabited island nearby. With them is Captain Benson, the pilot and the only living adult among them. He is, however, immensely injured and immobile. That night, the cadets start to feel hungry and thirsty, but they have nothing to consume. Cadet Colonel Ralph tells everyone to sleep it off, and they'll figure out what to do in the morning. The next morning, Simon, one of the cadets, ventures out alone to find water. Luckily, he finds a river and immediately tells the others about it. Right away, the cadets flock to the river to quench their thirst. After this, some head to the mountains to scout the area while others gather fruits to eat. Meanwhile, a chubby kid finds a conch on the beach, which he gives Ralph. Ralph blows on the conch, and everyone runs to the beach to see what the fuss is about. When everyone is complete, he explains that anyone who holds the conch gets to speak. After this, Ralph talks about their situation, claiming that the island might be uninhabited. One of them suggests exploring the island to confirm this, but Ralph reminds them that they still have hope because they have a grown-up with them. Just then, the chubby kid raises his hand to speak. When the conch gets handed to him, he expresses his worry about never getting rescued because nobody knows where they are. With this, Ralph suggests setting up a steady signal like a fire that'll keep burning. He then adds that they need to have rules. Jack, one of the cadets, supports the idea about the fire. One asks if he's the leader because he's the oldest, but most of the others argue that it should be Ralph since he's the senior cadet. Jack congratulates Ralph for being the leader, but the others remain humble, saying that it doesn't matter who's in charge as long as they work together. After this, they begin their first task, which is to build a camp. As Jack and some other cadets start creating a little hut, the chubby one talks about keeping themselves safe until they get rescued. However, Jack breaks it to him that it'll never happen since the plane is down in the ocean and there's no wreckage. Suddenly, the chubby kid bluntly tells Jack to shut up. He then argues that they need positive people and him scaring the others won't help. However, Jack mocks him by saying that he's the one they don't need. The others laugh at this, and they start calling him Piggy, which eventually becomes his nickname. After hearing them mock Piggy, Ralph tells them to shut up. Later, some of the cadets march to a mountaintop while carrying firewood. Using Piggy's glasses, they successfully start a fire. However, they panic when the flames spread, causing a nearby tree to burn down. Just as the sun is setting, the fire slows down. Piggy and another kid get assigned to watch the fire in case it dies down. The next cadets on duty take a while to report, and Piggy gets pissed at them when they finally arrive. That night, the rest of the cadets gather around a campfire near the beach. There, Jack shares a scary story, which causes some of the kids to cry out of fear. The next morning, Ralph and Jack walk along the beach while discussing their current situation. Ralph keeps worrying, but Jack reminds him that they've gone a long way and they'll be fine. To ease his mind off any negativity, Jack pushes Ralph, leading them into play fighting on the beach. Later, they head deeper into the island to hunt for food. A wild boar suddenly rushes past them, but Jack fails to capture it. On firewatch duty, some of the cadets feast upon a tiny lizard that they just roasted. The following morning, Captain Benson miraculously recovers from his injuries, and he tells the rest to get ready because they're about to be rescued. Suddenly, Simon wakes up next to the unconscious Mr. Benson, revealing that he was only dreaming. When morning finally comes, Ralph notices that the others are messing around too much, and none of them are working. Because of this, he blows on the conch to call for an assembly. He expresses his concern to the others, telling them to have discipline. He also adds that they need to do more spearfishing because they need real food. One of the cadets announces that his pocket knife has gone missing. The rest claim that some of their things have been disappearing too, so they need to have punishments for thieves. When Ralph asks what it should be, the cadets come up with brutal responses. However, Ralph opts to hand out demerits, but the others mock him for it. Later, Ralph and some other cadets go out to do some spearfishing. Jack and his gang suddenly start throwing rocks at them, but they stop when Ralph yells at them to leave. When they finally do, his companions reveal to Ralph that Jack was sent to military school after the police arrested him for stealing a car and taking it on the highway. The following day, Jack and his gang sharpen their weapons as they're about to hunt the boar. Simon walks over to them with a chameleon he's been carrying around as a companion. Just then, one of the kids claims that they need to practice on something that moves, so he takes Simon's chameleon and pierces it with a spear. Shocked, Simon takes his chameleon and leaves without a word. Suddenly, something moves in the bushes, causing Jack to sprint towards it in hopes that it's the boar. To his surprise, it's Captain Benson, and it seems like his concussion and fever have caused him to be delusional. The cadets lead him back to the beach, where he rests. Jack suggests getting rid of him, but Ralph refuses, saying that they need to nurse him back to health. That night, Captain Benson leaves the camp and wanders deep into the island. The cadets only realize that he's gone when they wake up in the morning. Right away, they set out to find him, only to discover his clothes on the rocky coast. Simon refuses to believe that Captain Benson is dead, but Ralph explains that the man has gone mad. The next day, Jack and his gang resume their hunt for the boar. The boar shows up and Roger tries to catch it but misses. He accidentally slams his head on the ground, but he reports to Jack that he managed to stab the creature with his knife. Jack honors Roger's achievement by marking his face with the boar's blood. He also places some on himself, and later that night, he ponders over something. The next day, a helicopter passes by the island. Ralph immediately dashes to the mountaintop, only to find that the fire has died. With this, he desperately calls for the helicopter but fails to gain its attention. When Ralph returns to the camp, he gets greeted by Jack and his gang. Their faces are painted with blood and dirt, and they also have a dead boar. Ralph angrily blames them for not being rescued because they didn't report on firewatch duty. Jack replies that they were hunting and that they're sick of Ralph. This causes tension between the two, and they get into a physical fight. Piggy stops them, only to end up getting thrown on the ground. Jack then announces that he'll make a separate camp for hunters and for those who want to have fun. However, Ralph says that they should stick together, but Jack dismisses his offer. Carrying the boar with them, Jack leaves with his gang, which is mainly composed of the older cadets. Meanwhile, Piggy and the younger ones stay with Ralph. Eventually, a helicopter passes by. Ralph screams in glee, but the aircraft explodes. Suddenly, Simon wakes up and it only turns out to be a dream. Ralph tells him that there's a storm, so they gather the others into their shelter. However, the wind gets stronger, forcing them deeper into the island. When morning comes, the cadets confirm that they're still complete without any of them being injured. They also find some bananas, which they all share for breakfast. After this, Ralph tells his friends that they should go to the mountaintop and start a fire. On their way there, they run into the boar that Jack's gang previously hunted. It's abandoned on the ground with none of the others around. Still, Ralph and his friends continue to the mountaintop, where they soon start a fire. Elsewhere, Jack and his gang go on a hunt. Larry, the youngest in the group, strays away when he finds an iguana. He follows it until he finds himself in front of a cave, which he decides to explore. However, a man suddenly grabs Larry's leg, causing him to scream and stab the man before escaping. He reports this to Jack, claiming that a monster with a wet mouth attacked him. Pissed with the fuss he caused, Jack and the rest decide to check the cave. Upon arriving, Jack and Roger hear the bellowing growl of the man inside the cave. This scares them and they all run as far as they can. Later, Jack and Roger head to the mountaintop to get some fire, and while they're there, they warn Ralph's cadets about the monster in the cave. This scares the younger members, so they leave their watch to report to Ralph. Just then, Jack's gang stops them, demanding to take the survival knife. Piggy refuses, claiming that it belongs to the camp. He also complains that one of them just joined Jack's group, and the others claim it's because of the monster. Ralph doesn't believe in the monster, but this leads to 2 more cadets from his group to join Jack as they leave. That night, while Ralph and the others are asleep, Jack's group attacks the camp. They destroy the shelter and go off running with the knife in hand. Meanwhile, Piggy sobs as he realizes that his glasses are broken. The following day, Simon goes to Jack's camp, where he asks where the cave is. Elsewhere, Jack and the others are at the cave's entrance, where they leave a pig's head on a pike as an offering to the monster. As they return to their camp with the pig's body, Simon observes them through the bushes. Later, Jack and his gang head to Ralph's camp, where he announces that they can come to the feast that he's having that night. He also refers to himself as the chief. At the feast, Ralph finds that the twins, Sam and Eric, have joined Jack. This leaves him Piggy and Simon as the remaining members of his group. Jack then gives Ralph and Piggy some meat as promised, but demands to be acknowledged for his benevolence. However, Ralph only reminds him that they should be one group again. Jack agrees, adding that he can join his camp and have all the meat he wants. However, Ralph says he doesn't need meat, and he only came to the feast to try and talk sense to him. One of the cadets states that he doesn't have the conch, so anything Ralph says is invalid. However, Piggy replies that the conch is in their camp where it belongs. This angers Jack, so he pushes Piggy and tells them to leave. He then gathers his gang, whom he now calls hunters. They perform a ritualistic dance where Roger plays the monster while the others pretend to attack him. Meanwhile, Simon goes to the cave with the light stick, where he discovers Captain Benson's corpse. It turns out that he was only mistaken for the monster. With this, he immediately dashes into the beach where the feast is held. At the same time, the hunters are hyped up by their little ritual. When Simon comes running to them with only the green light being seen, they think of him as the monster. Jack leads the hunters to attack Simon, stabbing him with their spears. It takes them a while to realize who they just killed, but by the time they do, it's too late. The following morning, Ralph mourns Simon's death, blaming himself for not doing anything. Piggy comforts him by saying that it was all a terrible accident. Elsewhere, Jack whips one of his hunters for killing the fire. After this, he tells the hunters to be vigilant as the monster can come anytime. Meanwhile, Piggy suggests making a raft and just leaving the island. However, he worries that the Russians might end up rescuing them and they might be forced into the Olympics. This makes Ralph laugh, reminding Piggy that this should be the least of his worries. That night, Jack and the hunters attack their camp. They poke their spears into their shelter, demanding Piggy to come out. However, after they take his glasses, they go on their merry way. When morning comes, Piggy cries his eyes out, saying that maybe they should just join Jack's tribe since it'll be hard for them to survive if he can't see. Later, the two head to Jack's camp. Ralph brings the conch with him, announcing that he's calling for an assembly. However, Jack doesn't adhere to this rule anymore, so he disses Ralph. The other demands Jack to return Piggy's glasses, and adds that he should have just asked if he wanted some fire. This angers Jack, as he believes that he can take anything he wants. He attacks Ralph with a spear, but he fights back with the stick he's carrying. The two end up wrestling on the ground, but they suddenly stop when they hear the conch's sound. With Piggy holding the conch, he announces that he's about to speak. Despite the hunters jeering, Piggy states that they might end up staying on the island forever if they don't get rescued, so they shouldn't act like kids. As he tries to talk some sense into them, Roger pushes a boulder on top of a cliff, which falls on Piggy's head and kills him. Everyone falls silent, shocked at what they just witnessed. Angry, Ralph looks at Jack and swears revenge on him. However, he's forced to leave when the hunters start throwing rocks at him. That night, Sam and Eric are on duty for the fire watch. Ralph secretly meets up with them, but the twins warn him to stay away because the hunters are planning to kill him. Before leaving, Ralph reminds the twins to stand up to Jack, or they'll just be another one of his servants. The following morning, Ralph wakes up to the smell of smoke. The hunters have set fire to the forest to draw him out, and he could hear them close by. With this, Ralph makes a run for it, but Jack and the others hear him. As he's being chased, he decides to stop and hide under a fallen tree. The twins see him, but when Jack asks if they've seen Ralph, they say no. Unfortunately, Roger spots him, which leads to another chase toward the beach. Ralph stumbles on the sand, only to be greeted by a US Marine Corps officer. The rest of the hunters arrive on the beach, screaming and ready to kill Ralph. However, they fall silent when they see the officer, who wonders what the kids are doing. It turns out that the smoke from the fire caught some attention, and now they're about to be rescued. As this sinks into Ralph's head, he breaks down in tears, mourning the friends he lost just because the other group wanted to take control.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.